But let me just give you a hypothetical here that Trump could have done. And I think he would have shocked the world as well as done something extremely positive in a diplomatic and geopolitical, geostrategic sense. He said all these things about he would end the Ukraine war in 24 hours or a day or two or whatever. We all knew that was preposterous. But was it? If he had come in and instead of contemplating his first visit to Mohammed bin Salman or his first state visit to this country being the Bibi Netanyahu, if he'd have come in and said, get me a plane ticket, shut up, get me a plane ticket, Air Force One, let's go. I want to go to Moscow. Get Vladimir on the phone, tell him I'm coming. Sit down in Moscow with Putin. As you went over Kyiv, spit at Zelensky. Then get to Moscow, sit down with Putin, and in a couple of hours, you could come up with Putin himself, you and Putin, you could come up with the rough design that was leaked in that Newsweek article and took into account most of the real parameters of a negotiated settlement and a peace. Then you go back over Kyiv and you spit at Zelensky again, and you hope someone's hanged him by that time. You get back to Washington and you tell the administration you now head as the major guy, you know, that's what you say. That's what you say. You are the boss. You tell everybody, gear yourself to this. The war in Ukraine is over. I want all the money to stop. I want all the arms to stop. I don't want one scintilla of either to get to Kyiv again. I'm going back in a week. We're going to meet again and we're going to settle the deal. Me and Vladimir. And it's going to be over. And Vladimir's not going to do anything to the rest of NATO, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, or anybody else. And we're not going to do anything to him. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to sign an executive order that Ukraine's neutrality is 1,000 years into the future. I know that sounds idiotic, but I'm going to do that anyway, just to show you how I feel about it. And the war's over. And it's over within a month, if not less. That's the kind of drama he tried to create in his first term with his opening to Kim Jong-un and to North Korea. And look at what he did, because he didn't have the staying power. He didn't have the disciples around him who had the staying power and the talent and the brains. He ruined our ally in South Korea, who he made think that finally a peace agreement after 3/4 of a century was coming to the peninsula, and that they were going to be able to think about reunification, which is what, if you look at polls, about 75% of South Korea has wanted for a long time. Under 40, 80 to 90% of South Korea has wanted. He fouled them. Part of the problems happening in Korea right now, in Seoul, with the government and everything, all come out of this failed attempt by Donald Trump. Let's do something successful, President. Let's don't do this stupid stuff where you step out into it just to get drama and to get press. Let's follow through and let's actually complete the action. And where could he do that so solidly and so dramatically and so effectively and so positively other than Ukraine? I mean, it's there. The map is in front of him to do that. Gaza's a little bit different. It's a very much different, more sticky problem, as Netanyahu is going to show here over the next 24 hours or so. But he could do that with Ukraine and gain so much capital initially, right off the bat, gain capital, and put to rest some of these people out there who are screaming and hollering about, he's taking over the republic. He's going to destroy us. Elon Musk is an idiot going around with the keys from GAO to every building in the government. I know how hard it is to get those keys. We couldn't get them when the hanging Chads were still hanging in Florida, and we couldn't even get a space in the Harry Truman building. He seems to be able to get wherever he wants to get and have the keys with him. The empire wants to destroy. The empire wants to get rid of. The empire wants to change majorly, if not totally. And that's what aid is aimed at. The world finally is waking, at least 6 billion people in the world are finally awakening to the fact that they're farcical. They are disguised for post-colonial colonialism. They are disguised for hegemony. They are disguised for you do it my way or go to the highway and we'll rip the highway up on you. They're a disguise for we will drop bombs on you if you don't correspond with our wishes. they're a disguise for we've been allied with the 5 to 6% of people in Latin America, for example, who are oligarchs and oriented towards the same thing we are, profit and not their people. And we will be associated with you and you alone. And we will overthrow any government that tries to give the people power. In Venezuela, in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Argentina, in Chile, anywhere in Latin America that this happens, we will destroy you. That's the empire. And that's what's going to kill us. Well, I think in France's case, we really have an inept government that's scrambling and trying everything it can to not be pushed out of power. And that's tainting everything. But you made a good point. I saw an economic analysis, which was very convincing, that demonstrated to me that if, for example, the major powers, European powers of NATO, were to even meet within a percentage point or so, Donald Trump's insistence on their defense spending, that most of the social programs that make Europe a standout region in the world today make people say, I'm happy to live in Denmark, get them high ratings on educational polls and happiness polls and social harmony polls would disappear overnight because all their social programs would have to go. If they went to, say, 5% of GDP on defense, forget your social programs. They're gone. What kind of turmoil do you think that would create amongst their electorates? So they're desperate right now, trying to figure out how to deal with this. And they make demonstrations of, fealty to the empire over Ukraine. At the same time, they realize it's political suicide to go to that kind of expenditure because for any length of time, because they'll have to kill their social programs. They're very luxurious social programs. Donald Trump may have peaked in his power, presidentially speaking, this early in his administration, particularly with these tariff deals. I'm going to put tariffs on Canada. I'm going to put tariffs on Mexico. Oh, no, now they're going to do what I want them to do, so I'm not going to do it. A lot of what he's doing right now is just that. It's to scare people. It's to make dramatic notes in the market, as it were. It's to maybe sometimes fulfill campaign promises, but he has absolutely no idea how to make any of what he's promised work. And the big problem right now is Ukraine, because he has no idea how to make that war stop. None whatsoever. If he did, the very first visit he'd make would be to Moscow without Zelensky anywhere around. He would ignore Zelensky as he flew over him, go to Moscow, sit down with Putin and talk. And between the two of them, they could probably come up with subsequent talks with experts, not people like Trump is appointing to his team, but real experts. Putin would have no problem doing that. And they could get this thing ended in a month or two, probably. And it'd be ended on the basis of what Donald Trump himself has said in the Newsweek article, at least, which I assume was a leak, are the main parameters of a deal. And it'd be over. And Putin would not be interested in any other attack on any other NATO country. I guarantee you that. And we would be at least without one of the empire's efforts to stymie this change in power in Europe. At one point, Colin Powell actually thought about getting rid of the whole apparatus, which is what we're doing now, maybe. But it was a reason to do it because it was dysfunctional in such an enormous sense. All it did was make money for contractors, most of whom are based in the U.S. Now, do they know that? Does Elon Musk know that? Does anybody else in the Trump administration know anything about what they're doing? Probably not, because what they're doing is just doing it for political purposes. So I have no idea how to comment on what it means to Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio may understand what I've just said, at least intuitively, if not comprehensively, and wants to maintain something of the old U.S. aid, for example. Maybe even had plans to revitalize it in that regard. He'd need the Congress to help him, of course, to do that. But in any event, this is a tempest in a teapot in every respect in terms of the effectiveness of the U.S. international development program. And don't get Samantha Power to tell you about that. or anybody else who's been involved in it, and probably Condi Rice, Powell's successor as Secretary of State, because they want to maintain it. They want to keep that. They want that money to flow wherever it flows. It's kind of like the contractors in Ukraine. The money doesn't flow to Ukraine. The money flows to Lockheed and back to the United States, the arms money at least. And what that meant was a couple of things that were really disastrous to the original USAID mission. One was that all these contractors competed with one another. And so there was no sharing of best practices. There was no cross-border, if you will, or cross-county or precinct. Afghanistan comes to mind immediately. No one would share anything that they learned in one province for the other province, because that gave your contractor competitor a knee up. It gave him your information. So USAID became basically dysfunctional. It couldn't even do anything really comprehensive because it had all these contractors. Now, where do these contractors basically come from? Well, occasionally there's one or two hired in country, but most of them come from the United States. Now, the United States Congress's reason for doing this primarily. All this money flowed back into the United States, but development suffered as a result of this change because it was a fractious, disconcerted, uncoordinated effort in the field, and the managers who were professionals at it, and usually foreign service officers or the like, civil service or what have you, who do what they were doing, were totally frustrated. Let me tell you the truth about USAID. And this truth comes from being in the room repeatedly for 3 years as chief of staff of the State Department. Andrew Natsios, Boston born and bred, was the director of USAID at that time. And we commiserated with him and others, including Colin Powell, about the demise of USAID. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that Jesse Helms and others in the Congress, who had already destroyed virtually ACDA, the independent arms control agency, and USIA, the Independent Information Agency, which had been, at least its predecessor, responsible for the most effective machine we'd ever put together in that regard, the Voice of America during the Cold War. All of these things were destroyed by Republican congressmen and others who really don't like foreign policy and really don't, and I say don't in the present tense, Jesse's dead, because plenty of them linger, from Tommy Tuberville to Tom Cotton. What aid is and was for us, disappointingly so, and has continued to be, is a few people of the traditional aid character belonging to U.S. aid and by extension to the U.S. Department of State, managing hundreds, if not thousands, of contractors, private contractors. Oh, yes, we privatized everything in the U.S. government under Dick Cheney, and we privatized development. And history demonstrates that from time to time, at least, and those times are very horrendous in some occasions, the side pushing for force is the side that wins out, often on multiple planes. That is to say, if you look at World War I or World War II, it was quite a lot of people that walked into that war knowing what they were walking into, but not knowing what they were walking into. So you got to get rid of that, I think, to have a more peaceful world and to have a world that doesn't always court destruction with these nuclear weapons. And you don't do it by using the policies of the past. The policies of the past are bereft. They're broken. They didn't work. They led us periodically into war that could be settled. Some would say some wars must end. Some wars must be fought, as Edward Wacko argue. Why? You ask the question. Why? Because there are people in the world who think the way you do, and there are people in the world who act the way you do. I don't think, first of all, you can stop this. This is going to happen. I think the best you can do, and what you should do, what wisdom, if it prevailed, would cause you to do, is to go along with it. Not in the sense that you surrender. There's no surrender or victory associated with this kind of movement. in the sense that you accommodate it and you deal with it and you prosper from it yourself. And you don't try to fight it in the sense of using your vast military strength to do so. So if you recognize what's happened, you recognize the irrepressible inexorability of what's happening, that history is against you. History is moving as it once moved before to shift from the east to the west. It's now moving to shift from the west to the east. If you understand that and you try to accommodate it and make all the money you can from it and do all the trade and commerce you can from it, which is kind of what happened with the East as they tried to accommodate the shift from their territory into our territory, as it were, then you can make a whole lot better world out of it. You don't have to be in a zero-sum game. You don't have to be in a hegemonic game. You don't have to be in this, this is what I don't like about Mearsheimer's realism, for example. You don't have to be in this world where you have to admit to yourself that war is inevitable, that we are going to kill each other because of the power struggles in the world. I think that's nonsense. I know history vouchsafes that John is more often than not right, but it still means that there's no hope. There's no ability to get out of this trap, if you will. And right now, the trap has a part of it that is very, very dangerous: nuclear weapons. And to arrest this shift, if you maintain the posture that Donald Trump and the rest of this empire seems to want to maintain, you're going to result in using nuclear weapons, because that's the only thing you have at the end of the day to stop the shift. And you're going to stop it all right. You're going to stop it for all of human civilization, probably. And that's a daunting prospect to think about it. And yet, I've been alive long enough to know that this country sometimes makes some really bad decisions. And this would be the ultimate bad decision, in my view. There's no other country on earth that I can think about right now that possesses nuclear weapons that has the remotest thought of using them, except us. My point being, let's break the mold. And let's break the mold, because there won't be any mold in the future if we don't break the mold, because we have now invented the means to destroy ourselves. And so that is a mighty impetus, in my view, to doing things on a different level, to doing things better, and to doing wiser things. That doesn't mean you aren't going to have a brush conflict every now and then, or, something on the periphery. You can't hardly prevent it with things like Israel existing, and the tension that brings. But again, I go back to my theory, and I don't think it's theory, I think it's reality. Israel is our attack dog in the Levant. That's what they are. You could throw AIPAC out tomorrow morning and we'd still be using Israel as our attack dog in the Levant, because we want to keep a reasonable hegemony in the Middle East, but we don't want to have boots on the ground necessarily to do it. So we have Israel to do it for us. I find that unconscionable this late in man's life on this planet, this early in the 21st century, if you will, a century in which we may be. But what does that have to do with the kind of problems, the kind of challenges you and I are discussing right now? Absolutely nothing. So it's fighting over a tempest in a teapot while the stove the teapot is on is exploding. You're just not going to accomplish anything worth note by focusing on these issues that don't matter a tinker's damn, even though they might be politically sellable and politically positive for your cult. You're not going to accomplish anything in the bigger scheme of things, and in the scheme of things that says, I arrest this shift of power, or maybe you don't arrest it. I don't think that's possible, but I accommodate it and I go along with it so that we can maximize our advantage from it as it happens. And we're talking about a lot of years here that this is going to take to happen. The last one took about 1,000 years. This one will be faster, but I don't think it'll be that much faster. Those are my final words, is the empire needs to accommodate, not challenge, not threaten, not sanction, not use proxies. It needs to accommodate. We need to learn how to accommodate. George Washington had this idea, and George Washington was a seminal character in promoting this idea. You know, Simon Bolivar actually had the Marquis de Lafayette come to his inauguration, as it were, after the wars were over, and Simon was the savior of South America. And he said, in his own language, he said something to the effect of, "I've got the man here representing the greatest freedom movement in the world, and I've got his emissary, Marquis de Lafayette," because he brought a medal from Washington to give to Simon Bolivar. Those were powerful moments. And the ideas behind our revolution were powerful ideas. If only we would just promote those ideas instead of going out with bombs, bullets, and bayonets and nullifying those ideas. All the things that Trump has promised to do that he hasn't done, or that he did, like the tariffs, and then reversed, with the exception of the ones on China, Canada, and Mexico. They're there. Oh my God, avocados are going to cost $18 a piece. I changed my mind. We've negotiated, we've talked, and look at what he got out of Trudeau. He got considerations. So, you know, there is something to be said for this post-Trump power peak. We're already at it. Only a week or so into his administration, we're at his power dwindling instead of increasing. That's a problem too, though, for people like Musk and Vance and Thiel and others who want to do things like, for example, reverse South Africa's victory over the white people. But you are looking at a man who has lost a lot of what he originally said, and I think the really glaring point in that regard right now is Ukraine. Look at what he could have done. I mean, if he really is the person that he claimed to be during the election and during the campaign for the presidency, then what he should have done, don't even put Keith Kellogg in there except as a vassal. I'd put a younger vassal in there. Go sit down with Putin. Ignore Zelensky. Putin will sit down with him. Go to Moscow. My God, pull a Tulsi Gabbard. Go to Moscow. Sit down with Vladimir Putin and negotiate and come up with the framework and everything else. And as you're passing back by Kyiv, wave at Zelensky. I mean, that would have been a forceful president. That would have been a president intent on fulfilling one of his principal campaign promises. Meanwhile, you're doing that. You're greasing the skids with your talks with Putin by cutting off all arms and all money, period. Nothing is getting in. And telling your NATO partners, if you send anything in, I will punish you maximally, which Donald Trump is well equipped to do and likes to do. Now they're seriously talking, and I think they will probably go this route. My personal view is they will go this route about a nuclear weapon themselves, because they want to defend themselves, get us off the peninsula. We messed it up. We fouled it up. And Donald Trump did the lion's share of that fouling up. And he doesn't even know it, Neiman. If I went into the Oval Office tomorrow morning and briefed this to him, he would look at me like he was a surprised deer in the headlight. You know, I did all that. Yeah, you screwed the U.S.-Korea alliance. You screwed it with your dramatic overture to do what most South Koreans wanted done and had wanted done for a long time. I was there, been there for a lot of my life. You screwed it, and in their view, you probably screwed it for their lifetimes. You've got him building more nuclear weapons, allied with Russia. What did you do for us, Donald? Please don't come back and try anything else.